Good morning, everybody. This is Melody. I'm coming to you live this morning from my own personal home garden, landscape, and turf, and all my adjacent property here, just to give you a sampling of some of the weed species that we see this time of year, late June through the summer months of July and August, and we'll visit back again later in the summer so you can see some of the summer annuals just starting to emerge. You can actually see what those seed heads and flowers will look like later. But hopefully this will give you a little bit better understanding of some of the weed species that we see this time of year. Or maybe I shouldn't use the terminology weeds per se, because weed is any unwanted plant. So some of these may be actual plants that you want on your property, but some, especially in the garden, we want to go ahead and get control of. So come take a walk with me. So let's begin our weed walk with a pretty popular one that we've discussed. This one here is Plantain. You can actually see the flower spikes coming up from the plant, as well as intermingled there with some white clover and some dandelion. Okay, do we know what the beginning of this is? This is a morning glory. These here are also morning glories. You can see that distinctive heart-shaped leaf, which is the third leaf to emerge. Now, what do we see here, folks? We see some zinnias, yes, but we also see a morning glory that has gotten rather large. And you can see how easy it is to just pluck that morning glory right up out of the ground. You can see that fibrous root system. Okay, so what about this weed here? Fairly young, easy to control at this age, or stage, however you want to look at that. Plus you'll also see some many more smaller ones starting to pop up through the mulch. Well, this is what that turns into. The hairy galanzoga. And you can see how tiny that flower is right there. That contains so many seeds. Okay, so we've got something munching on this weed. But I want you to see it's intermingled in with the pepper plant here. But this is the pigweed that I was talking about, and you can see that red stem there. See, that's what I'm talking about. You can't just, even as wet as it is, you just can't pull that out of the ground. It's going to require some other implements like my hoe. Here is another pigweed in the midst of several hairy galanzoga weeds, and yet another pigweed. Okay, now here I have, just on the edge of this garden, I have some herbs intermingled with flowers, but you can see the carpet of hairy galanzoga that has taken over and encroached on my marigold, and you can see a morning glory also popping through there. Now, we spend a lot of time talking about these fibrous root systems. You can see what I'm referring to there. Alright, so what do we have here? Is that a grass? Or is that a sedge? Well, let's take a peek. Ooh, that's a nutsedge. Now remember, they reproduce by the bulbs. Of course, this is a young plant and I didn't pull it up thoroughly enough, but that's why when we pull these out of the garden, we don't ever want to go shaky, because that spreads those rhizomes. Of course, you can't see that here, but the sedges have that triangular stem. Here is the infamous wild carrot with a Queen Anne's lace, a biennial. It will put out foliage that looks similar to our garden carrot the first year, and then the umbel flower, although it's flat, will produce the second year. This is one of nature's toilet paper plants. Some consider it a weed, some do not, but this is Mullen. And here is Mullen with its flower stalk. You can see it's getting some size to it. Pretty vigorous plant that grows throughout the summer months. A dabble of crabgrass? I do believe so. Weed? Yes, some would say so. It's actually a calorie pear that is beginning. And you can see it intermingled with some wild strawberries. We also can see some clover. Here's one we refer to as prickly lettuce. Can be rather vigorous and grow quite tall. It's kind of hard for me to walk in there, but this is that prickly lettuce. See how tall that gets. And here we go with lots of prickly lettuce. You can see it all along this fence row here. And here is a sample of pokeweed. You can see the flower on the top with that distinctive red stalk. This is a very spindly one. Here's another that some term a weed, but some do not. This is chicory, also known as a famous coffee substitute, especially in New Orleans. And just another shot of a wild carrot. You can see how vigorous that plant is. And what do we have here growing into the rocks? You know how Bermuda grass likes to crawl. Also intermingled there with the dandelion. But if we don't get control of this here, then it's just going to keep spreading and growing up the rocks and into the rest of our flower beds. And here we have creeping euonymus. Some people like this as a shrub. It crawls, hence the name creeping, but it can be rather invasive and take over the universe if we're not careful. That little spot there that has died back was crown vetch, which is often planted as a cover crop, but dies back in the heat of summer. Coming up in masses here is what we refer to as ironweed. It'll throw off a beautiful tall purple spike in late summer. Often see it intermingled with ragweed and or goldenrod. Now this has been mowed back, but you can see the prolific stand here of nutsedge. See how much brighter green that is compared to the grass and the clover? That's usually indicative of a nutsedge. And here is a prime example of some morning glory that you can see intermingling there, as well as some multiflora rose blooming there in the background. And here's a better look at pokeweed. See how large that plant can be? It's taller than I am, y'all. But you will notice here that the berries will start to be set, and they produce from that flower. That's where the fruit will come from, which are very toxic, don't forget that. And just for giggles, or not, here's a rather nice stand of poison ivy growing in a woodland area, actually growing up the tree. A dandelion seed head dispersed by the wind. Let's see, here is a start of that creeping euonymus. It's better to get a hold of this now rather than later because of the way it reproduces itself. See that stem there? Pretty complex root system. Do you know what this is? This has been recently mowed down, but this was a nice little stand of Johnson grass. I say that jokingly. Here's a Johnson grass that the mower missed. You can see it looks like corn, grows rather tall. And here we have another plantain, narrow leaf variety. And here is one that we refer to as smartweed. You can see that pink flower low growing to the ground. And take a gander at this. This is the wild grapevine. You can see it is indeed a vine, and it latches on with its tendrils to anything and everything and grows in masses. It's not very forgiving. Okay, folks, do we know what this is? This is Spurge. How do we know that? Let's check. See what I just did? I just broke an end of that off, and you can see that milky sap, which is indicative of Spurge. This is a small seedling here, but this is lamb's quarter. Can get very large. It's a heavy, high load seed producer. Do we know what the smattering of this weed here is? This is actually dock. And here is another fine sample of dock. Can get very large and has a very extensive taproot. Okay, what about this little patch here? At first glance, you might think it's henbit, dead nettle, one of those winter annuals that we see blooming prolifically in the springtime. However, upon further inspection, you can see that the leaf arrangement is different. It's a little blurry, sorry about that. But this is actually what we call heel-all, or prunella as the Latin is referred to, or self-heal, you may hear it referred to. Many folks consider this an herb. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that short tour of weeds that we see growing in the summertime. Feel free to join back with us in a couple of months to see how the progression of these weeds have taken place. We'll see you soon.